Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to Belgium once again, and we're going to have a look at a beer from another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. These guys seem to be a very highly rated brewery. The beer that we're going to have a look at is one of my favourite styles of Belgian beer, and it's also got a little bit of a kind of Scottish flavour to it as well. So I think this one could make for a very interesting introduction to this brewery. So hopefully it's an interesting beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Turnhout, which is in the very north of Belgium, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Brouwerij Het Nest, or the Nest Brewery, if you translated it into English. But this particular beer is called Four Aces. It comes in at 10% ABV, and they're describing this one as a peated quadrupel. So yeah, I think this one could be very interesting. As I've told you in previous reviews, my whole love of craft beer began with the Bamberg Rauch beers, the Schlenkerlas and things like this. I love a good peated whiskey as well. And then when it comes to Belgian beer, my favourite styles would be the blonde, the triple, the quadruple, and also the Flanders Red. So I think this idea of putting a little bit of peated malt into a quadruple could make for a very, very interesting beer. And that was my main motivation behind buying this one. This beer arrived here in Sweden as part of the Tillfällig temporary assortment, and I couldn't tell you exactly when this one was released because I've been sitting on this beer for a little while. But yeah, very, very curious to see how it turns out. Nice to finally get around to reviewing this one for you here on the channel. So as I said earlier, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one, and definitely nice to introduce another Belgian brewery to you here on the channel as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Brouwerij Het Nest. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Belgian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, not as regularly as I would like. I do need to make a Belgian order at some stage in the near future, so I can do some regular Belgian beers for you. We'll see about sorting that soon, but as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brouwerij Het Nest then, on to my brewery notes. So Brouwerij Het Nest, or the Nest Brewery as it would translate into English, are based in Turnhout to the northeast of Antwerp in the north of Belgium. So the brewery evolved from a group of friends who used to meet every 2 weeks to taste beer and talk about football. So they founded a beer tasting group officially back in 2000, and this was called Orde van de Zoete Mus, or the Order of the Drunken Sparrow. Again, an English translation there. But a while later, a few of them took a brewing course at a local brewing guild, and then they bought a small 50-litre brewing kit and started experimenting. So after winning a few prizes in local homebrewing competitions as well as national homebrewing competitions, they decided that they wanted to go commercial, and they ran a few trial brews back in 2006 before officially founding Brouwerij Het Nest in 2007. So they then produced 500-litre batches at Brouwerij Bolens in Belzele, and they soon launched what they call the Schuppenboer, which is the Jack of Spades, and this is a triple beer which is quite famous actually throughout the Netherlands. It was one of the first regional beers in this area of Belgium. But this beer proved to be very popular, and so they had to kind of upscale a little bit. So it was brewed at the Hofbrouwerij in Beersel, and then it was brewed later at Scheldebrouwerij in Meer, where it's still brewed today amongst a few of their other beers. But over time they continued to develop new recipes in their own brewery in Turnhout, and then they gradually released more and more new beers into the market. In 2015 though, they opened their new brewery in Old Turnhout, which is equipped with a 30 hectolitre brew kit, and it has an annual output of around 400,000 litres. But the facility also has a large cellar for barrel aging. They've got various different barrels in there with, port barrels, bourbon barrels, you know, a whole host of different things there. Their library, if you like, of different barrels is actually very, very impressive. And there's also got a tap room there as well, which looks very, very nice. So fingers crossed, if I make it to Belgium at some point in the future, I can go and check this out. I would love to do that. But all of the founders at this brewery hail from Turnhout originally, and this town is apparently known for its playing card industry, and so the company Carta Mundi, which is the world's largest producer of playing cards, have their headquarters there, and so this was the reason they decided to use the kind of playing card imagery for all of their beers. But the current president of the brewery is Bart Kuipers, and as of April 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 125 different kinds of beer. And like I say, all of the names of the beers have some relation to playing cards because of Turnhout's ties to the playing card industry, if you like. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brouwerij Het Nest just now, or the Nest Brewery, if you want to say it in English once again. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it. As I say, these guys seem to be a very highly rated brewery. They're one of the newer generations. Of Belgian breweries, I should say. It seems to be that, you know, Belgian brewing kind of kicked off again in the early 80s at the earliest part, and then it seems to have just kind of spiraled and gone exponential over the last kind of 40 years or something like that. So very cool, actually. You've got quite a few very old breweries in Belgium, of course, but then you've got a whole host of newer generation breweries who are doing some very interesting stuff as well. But yeah, very interesting stuff. But like I say, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages if you want to know more about all those different beers that they've done. Quite impressive for a Belgian brewery to have done 125 different beers, especially for a newer brewery like this, actually. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this beer itself then. So another interesting point to make about this beer is that this one is considered as a variant of their Klevertien beer, which is their winter beer, although this one apparently has a few differences, one of which is that they've added a little bit of peated malt into it, of course, and they've also added a few more kind of noble hops into it as well. It didn't say exactly what noble hop that they've put into this one, but yeah, it should be very interesting nonetheless. But yeah, just to let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open up, as you can see, it's quite kind of straightforward, but I think very, very effective. There you can see the Het Nest Brouwerij bottle cap on this one. Pronunciation for Dutch is all over the place in this video, so I do apologise for that, but there you can see the brewery symbol on the back of the bottle there, which is very nice. So this is like an etched bottle rather than a labelled one, of course, but I think it comes out very, very nicely. So yeah, 750 millilitres this one, 75 centilitres, however you want to describe it. I think I paid about 150 Swedish kronor for this, so that would be roughly about 15 euros, so somewhere in the region of, you know, 13 pounds sterling, maybe about 17, 18 dollars American, something like that. But yeah, 10% peated quadrupel, this one. I think it could turn out to be very, very nice. So yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. I also noticed something really interesting in that this beer says it has wheat malt and herbs in it. So I wonder if this has a little bit of the Groot in it as well. Groot, of course, was quite a famous substitute for hops in Belgium once upon a time. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. A 10% peated quadrupel. I think this could make for a really interesting beer. Let's see, hopefully it doesn't go crazy. No, I think it's all right. So yeah, that's one thing you have to be very careful of when it comes to Belgian beer, is that it is a very yeast focused thing. So you have to make sure, you know, when you get bottle fermentation like this or secondary fermentation, quite often the gas can build up, and if these beers are left to sit too long, sometimes they can blow up and go a little bit crazy. When it comes to quadruples and triples and stuff like that, they quite often add a little bit of brew sugar into them for the secondary fermentation. So yeah, well, brew sugar, candy sugar, however you want to call it. It's quite a common thing to do with triples and quadruples as well. So yeah, I think that should do for the tasting for the moment, and then I'm going to share the rest of this with friends, because drinking this yourself would just be a little bit mental, to be honest. So yeah, as you can see with this beer then, it's poured very nicely actually. I'm not sure how well you guys are going to see this on the camera, but if I shine the light through this one, it's got a lovely deep ruby colour to it. I think to you guys on the camera though, it's going to appear a little bit more of a kind of ebony rosewood sort of colour. But yeah, I'll tell you straight away, if you put the light through this beer, it's actually crystal clear. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but a fair stream of smaller ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But it looks very, very nice. As I say though, to you guys, this one will appear a little bit more of a kind of ebony rosewoody colour, but with maybe a little bit of a ruby edge. You can see that this beer poured with a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say fawn coloured head, but it certainly looks the part. I mean, the appearance of this beer is certainly not out with the realms of possibility for a quadruple, of course. But remember, when it comes to the colour of your beer, it depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil, 3, any adjuncts, and 4, any barrel aging that you happen to do. So yeah, factors 3 and 4 I don't think are at play in this one, but yeah, factors 1 and 2 obviously are a big part of that. I'm not sure actually how long the boil would be on a Belgian quadrupel, so I'm guessing it might be, you know, somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours. But yeah, the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But the colour that you get is dependent on the malts that you use in the first instance. So yeah, I think that summarises that pretty nicely. But in terms of a Belgian quadrupel, the appearance of this beer is not really surprising at all. This is definitely within the realms of possibility, but it's certainly, in a lot of ways, it's one of the more ruby leaning ones that I've come across, but to you guys on the camera it will appear very, very dark. But yeah, certainly looks the part. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on with this one. Very curious about this for sure. That's very nice. That is very, very nice actually. It's a beautiful beer. So what I'll say straight away is, if this beer is to be used as a benchmark for the other things that these guys do, I can certainly see just from the aroma why they're so highly rated. That's a beautiful, beautiful aroma. Remember though, I'm a little bit biased because, you know, being Scottish, I love a little bit of a peated whiskey. So whenever I smell peat in a beer, I think it comes across really nicely. And for me, remember, the main difference between a German Rauch malt, if you like, is that it's more kind of meaty in a sense, whereas the Scottish peat malts are a little bit more kind of earthy and grassy in their smokiness, and you do get that out of this beer straight away. So let's try and break down this aroma for you a little bit more then. Yeah. So the backbone of the beer is absolutely that nice peated malt there. So straight underneath everything you can smell that sort of earthy, grassy, peaty quality. Sitting on top of that you get a little bit of a kind of breadiness, definitely. You can smell the Belgian yeast coming out in there too. So it's really interesting. It's almost like you have this kind of doughy, bready base, if you like, which is the common thing that you'll come across with Belgian quadruples, and then you've just got this Scottish smokiness in there. So for me, this is kind of like a combination of the best of both worlds, if you like. There's a wee bit Scottish in there, and then you've got that big malty, sweet Belgian beer backbone. So yeah, this is beautiful. But this beer does take a little bit of time to kind of open itself up, so just be aware of that when you're enjoying the aroma of this one. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beers. That's always half the experience when it comes to craft beers and whiskies and sakes and things like that. But yeah, as I said, the peaty malts are the absolute backbone of this beer. You can smell one or two little woody elements in there, but yeah, the backbone of this beer is that earthy, grassy, peaty malt, just with a few little woody undertones in there. Sitting on top of that, you get a nice little bit of a kind of brown, wholemealy, bready sort of thing. That'll be the Belgian yeast coming into play. Belgian beer, of course, is very yeast forward, as I've explained many times in videos before. But on top of that, you get these lovely brown sugary elements that you expect of the Belgian Quadrupel. So yeah, it's got a really nice balance to it, this beer. And you know, if you're going to use peat malts, they're quite pungent, if you will. Pungent's maybe not the right word. They're quite dominant in a lot of ways, actually. So if you're going to use peat malts, you have to be very careful with these, because otherwise they can just take over everything. But I think they've got a really good balance in this beer, to be honest with you. So yeah, in the middle of the nose, you can definitely smell a little bit of that sweet, treacly molasses sort of thing. You do get an element of sweeter caramel in there, and there's a lot of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity quality coming out of this beer too. But on top of that, you get the nice kind of brown, wholemealy bread, the more doughy, yeasty elements to it, and a little bit of the bread crusty thing. And as I say, under that, you've got that big, earthy, grassy, peaty malt with a few kind of woody undertones to it as well. So yeah, this beer kind of it's got everything you'd expect of a quadruple, but at the same time, it's just got that kind of peated edge to it, that Scottish, grassy, earthy kind of peaty quality to it. It's a beautiful smelling beer, I'll say that straight away. The more that you smell of it too, the more it leans towards a mix of that bready and peaty quality. The aroma of this beer gets a massive thumbs up from me, but remember, as I say, I'm a little bit biased. I love a peated whiskey and I love a smoked beer, so this one is right on the money for me in a lot of ways. But yeah, that covers the kind of malty and yeasty side of things, I would say. On the hoppy side of the beer, it's kind of what you'd expect. When it comes to Belgian beers, I mean, some of them will use local Belgian produced hops, and Belgian hops for me are somewhere in between the German ones, which are a little bit kind of brighter and grassier and floral in a sense, and then you've got the earthy English and herbal sort of hops, if you like. So the Belgian hops are right in the middle of those two things for me. They display a little bit of the herbal and the earthy qualities of the English hops, but they also have a little bit more of a kind of floral and grassy sort of thing, a little bit of brightness that you expect of the German hops. It's a little bit difficult to place this one on the hoppy part of the spectrum. Definitely a little bit of earthiness, definitely a wee bit of a herbal quality, but at the same time you've got a nice bright and kind of floral aromatic note out of this beer, and a wee touch of grassy zestiness too, which I think is very interesting. But yeah, the fruity notes are pretty much what you would expect from a quadruple. But we'll come to that in a second. But as I say, when it comes to Belgian beers, usually the hops that they would use would be something like Czech Sats, a locally produced hop, something like this. They might use, you know, for something like this, they might well use like Northern Brewer from Germany, or Perl or Hallertau Tittnanger, something like this. So usually it's some sort of noble hop that they'll use in Doppelbox like this. I'm a bit unsure as to exactly what hop they would have used in this beer, but it certainly gives you a lovely green component, and the fruity notes in this beer are very interesting too. So let's focus on that fruity side of things now. So for me, this beer has a little bit of a raisiny sharpness, but underneath that you get a lovely kind of juicy figgy quality. There's a wee bit of a blackcurrant and a sharper blackberry kind of element to this as well. And these are all things that you would expect of a Belgian quadruple, absolutely. Some of these Belgian quadruples can give you a little bit of a sort of cakey note. This one really doesn't do that, and I think that's because of the peated malts in there. This one's leaning a completely different way. But yeah, the fruity notes for me are quite sharp in this one, and quite juicy in a lot of ways. So yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it, because it is quite unique in my opinion, but I think it's about time that we had a taste of this beer. So yeah, this one is the Four Aces, a peated quadruple from Brouwerij Het Nest in Turnhout in Vlaanderen, Flanders, in the northern part of Belgium, the Dutch-speaking region. Let's get stuck into this beer. Slange, Skull, Proust, Salty. Cheers. That is pretty nice, actually. I'll tell you something though, I've just taken one wee sip of this. The peated malts in this one are pretty powerful, and that's just from a little sip of this. So yeah, if you like a kind of a smoky beer or a peated whiskey or whatever, this one is going to be for you. The peated malts in this are quite prominent, so I think I'm going to enjoy this. I can tell you straight away I'm going to enjoy this beer. Fireworks. There we go. But yeah, that is a lovely, lovely beer, this one. It's definitely, I mean, what I will say about this beer is if you don't like peated malts, I don't think you're going to like this beer, because it is quite strong on that that peated malt sort of thing. I was a bit curious about this. Like I say, you have to be careful with peated malts because they can be very dominant when you use them. And I think this beer, it does. Just from a few sips, I can tell you straight away, this is quite a peat dominated beer. So if you want something a little bit sweeter, if you want a more kind of something that is a little bit more akin to a kind of regular quadrupel, if you like, maybe this isn't the beer for you. But for somebody like me who loves these big smoky characters and the peatiness and things, it's just very, very nicely done. Certainly got more peaty character to it than brown sugar, I will say that, but who knows, maybe it'll open up a little bit as we drink more of it. But yeah. You always have to be careful with beers like this. You know, it's like sour beers. When you first take them in, they're very, sharp and sweet and sour and things like this. But with even the malty beers like this, sometimes they take a little bit of time to mellow out. And I've got a feeling that that's what this beer is going to do. It's going to be very powerful on the peaty and earthy side of things in the beginning, but it will open up quite nicely. So yeah, let's try and break this beer down for you then and just see how we go. So straight away across the middle of your palate, you can feel that big peaty earthy malt in there. That just goes right across the middle of your palate. It's actually got a good little bit of dryness to it in the middle of the palate there too, but I think it works. So in that peated malt thing, that big peated malt vibe that this beer has, it dominates the middle of your palate and it pushes into the back third of the palate as well. But you get some nice straight up earthiness out of it. You get a good little bit of grassiness in there as well, as you would expect, and it just lingers there. It lingers there into the aftertaste. It's almost got a little tiny touch of a slightly charred edge to it as well, which I think is quite interesting. But for me, this is a beautiful, beautiful beer. I want to try the original one that they did, the Schuppenbohr. I think that would be a really interesting beer to try, that original triple that they did. But because this one seems to me as if it's a little bit more of a kind of speciality, kind of quirky sort of thing. So yeah, need to get a hold of one of the original beers for sure. But yeah, as I said, this beer, it takes a little bit of time to kind of mellow out, if you like. Once your palate kind of gets saturated, if you like, by those big peaty notes, then you start to get the other flavours out of it. So if you go to the front corners of your palate, then move diagonally back, you can feel a little bit of a woody note coming out of this one. If you go to the dead centre of your palate and then move forward, you can of course get a little touch of nuttiness out of this beer as well. If you just follow the central line of your tongue forward, you get a little bit of that. But yeah, this beer does develop a good little bit of that peaty dryness the further that you go into it, and that works. It really does work for the beer very nicely. So if you're thinking that this is going to be a traditional quadrupel, I think you're going to be mistaken with this one. It's definitely a little bit more about the peat than anything else. But yeah, on top of that nice kind of dry peaty backbone that you have, we're just talking about the middle of the palate here incidentally, on top of that you start to get some of the doughy, yeasty characters coming out of the beer. You can feel that nice sort of thicker brown bready element coming out of the beer. As I've always told you, Belgian beer is all about the yeast, so you can feel that nice layer of doughy kind of yeasty character coming out of this beer. And it's like it's a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of thing. You do get a little bit of that about it, but to me the bready and doughy notes in this beer feel a little bit thin, but that's potentially just because of the potency of the peated malt in this one. But if you go to the very centre of your palate, you definitely do get a little touch of that brown sugary element to this one. Quite often with these beers, the quadruples, the triples and things like this, they add brew sugar to them. That's one of the main reasons why your mouthfeel in Belgian beers isn't too thick despite the high alcohol percentages, because they put brew sugar in these beers to up the alcohol percentage rather than using it, building the alcohol percentage straight out of the malt base. But you can feel in this beer, if you go to that dead centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of that highly caramelized treacle molasses sort of thing out of the beer, and as you move progressively out from that, you get a little bit more of a kind of toasty caramelly note, and then as you move out towards the extremities of your palate, you'll get a little bit more of a kind of biscuity, McVitie's digestive sort of thing, a little bit of a kind of toasty caramel in there as well. So yeah, the concentration of the brown sugars, treacle molasses in the middle, a little bit of a kind of toasty brown sugary caramel there just on the outside of that, then a wee bit of a sweeter caramel, then some biscuity notes as you move out towards the edge of the palate there. But as I say, that's all sitting on top of this big peaty element which really dominates the beer. But that's just the middle third of your palate. If we go towards the back third of your palate, then on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a kind of doughy build up in a sense, and again it's actually got quite a well fired roasty backbone to it. It's almost at the point where it's like a well fired bread crust that sits there in that border region between middle third and back third of your palate. On the back third of your tongue, you'd definitely get more of the kind of drier aspects of the peaty side of this beer. So yeah, it is the more that I drink of this, it does become more peat heavy in a sense, but at the same time you start to detect the other flavours. So yeah, this is one that's going to saturate your palate in the beginning. It will mellow out, but then certain aspects really just linger with this. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend this beer to anyone who is not a fan of peat, definitely not, because it's really peat leaning, this, absolutely. Sometimes it says, yeah, peated quadruple, but people will think, oh yeah, quadruple is still going to be quite sweet. But no, this is quite a dry, smoky quadruple, definitely. But yeah, on that back third of your palate then, you can feel some of the drier aspects of the peated smoke, like I say. Sitting on top of that, of course, you get the sweet, you get those kind of taller yeasty elements sitting on top of it, so you get a little bit of that kind of brown bready, airy, yeasty kind of thing. So if you start at the back of the palate, the flavour feels like it's this tall. It gradually condenses down, and then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it just goes like that. And then into the middle third of your palate, it's got a nice big condensed flavour to it, which I think works really nicely. You do get a little bit more kind of brown sugary sweetness out of this beer the more that you drink of it, but yeah, the aftertaste, the strength of the aftertaste really dominates. So quite a bit of as I say, it's peat overload, this beer, but it works for me. I really like it. But yeah, I think that covers the kind of malty, yeasty, peaty side of this beer. This covers the middle third and the back third of your palate quite nicely. So yeah, let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, you do have a nice little touch of earthiness in there, and it's a fairly potent earthiness as well, and I think that balances out the peatiness that the beer has too. Like I said earlier, I suspect this beer has a little bit of noble hop in it. But as you move further forward on this one, it does get a little bit more herbal, and then as you move towards the kind of front corners of your palate, it gets a little bit more kind of floral and spicy in a sense. So yeah, I do wonder what this could be. Could there be a little bit of American hop in this one? Or could it be something like a Czech Sats, a Žatec hop? That would be interesting for sure as well. But yeah, that is another aspect to it as well, and I think that kind of helps promote some of the drier aspects of the peated malt in this one. So yeah, a nice big floral spicy note on the front corners of the palate. Round the front curve of the tongue though, it's definitely lighter and grassier. There is a wee bit touch of zestiness to this one too. That does make me wonder, would it be Czech Sats that's in this, and potentially some kind of American hop? So yeah, the green component in this beer does help promote some of the kind of smokier elements of this beer, the peatier, smokier elements, and some of the harsher and drier elements as well. So yeah, definitely a lot of food for thought with this beer. But you know, after 2,800 reviews, you want beers like this that are going to test your palate a little bit. But yeah, on the for the front third of your palate then, for the fruity side of this beer, that's the last thing we've got to examine before the mouthfeel. But yeah, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a kind of bready, doughy build up on this one, but you can feel it's got a little bit of that well-fired bread crusty kind of thing going on. But then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit peaty, but at the same time, it's smoothened out a little bit by a kind of bready, brown bready, homely bready, toasty bread crust kind of thing. There's quite a few things going on in this beer. It builds in complexity the more that you drink of it as well. But sitting on top of that that backbone that I've just talked about, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, let's examine those fruity parts then. So yeah, on the fruity side of the beer then, you do get a nice little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness when you take it in, but you can feel a little bit of a juicier note underneath that as you move. You know, you will feel on that front third of your tongue the peaty, dry notes really push their way out of this beer the more that you drink of, absolutely. But when you take the beer in, a little bit of a kind of raisiny, dried, purple, grapey sharpness out of this one, absolutely. So yeah, definitely. You do get a little bit of a juicy plum under there, and as you move further forward, it becomes more, it becomes a little bit more kind of figgy in a sense, and as you go onto that front half of the front third of your palate, you get a wee bit more, as I say, you get a little bit of a kind of juicy, there is a wee touch of a kind of black curranty note to it, and then on the very tip of your tongue you get a little bit of a kind of more oily blackberry, but then you know the dry peaty elements really push their way out of this beer. So yeah, it's this is one that's really made me think quite a lot. This one really shows you the very dry edge that you can get with peaty malts, but I think it works. You know, it's interesting because it on the front tip of your tongue it comes across as very dry, but in the middle third of your palate, when you've got the brown sugars to balance it out, it feels a little bit more mellow in a sense. So yeah, this is a beer that really has a lot going on in it, and I've certainly enjoyed trying it. But yeah, this is definitely not one, if you're not a fan of peated whiskies and things like that, I don't think you're going to enjoy this beer quite as much. You might want to go something for you might want to go for something a little bit less powerful than this, should we say. But yeah, I certainly like this one. This is a sipper, and I think my friends are going to enjoy this as well, because we all enjoy a little bit of peated whiskey. So yeah, quite a dry quadrupel, definitely. One of the driest that I've come across, in fact. So yeah, that's a really interesting beer. But thumbs up to Brouwerij Het Nest for doing something a wee bit different, because you're not going to find too many beers like this, that's for sure. But yeah, let's round off this tasting section then with the mouthfeel. I'd say that overall this beer, I want to say that it's pushing the bottom end of full bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth in this. It's got a little bit of a kind of silky, oily mouthfeel in a sense as well. This beer has quite a bit of dryness to it. Now, it's difficult to judge in this one where the bitterness ends and the dryness begins, because it's the peaty smoke gives you a lot of dryness in this. I'm really not sure how bitter this could be from that, and then, you know, what I'm thinking technically, does that dryness from the dryness and the slight bitterness you get from the peat count as IBUs? But, you know, overall, let's just say it does. Humour me on this. Potentially the dryness and bitterness of this beer is about 60 IBUs, something like that, potentially a little bit more. Remember though, this is my weakest point of beer reviewing, is the IBU count. I always mess this up. But yeah, like I say, the malt base in this one has a really dry backbone to it. It's got a really dry, toasty, roasty, well-fired, earthy kind of thing. So that's quite interesting. As the beer mellows out, you do get a wee bit more of a kind of toasty and sweet brown sugar to it, and you get some really juicy and sweet fruity elements out of the beer as well. Like once you get further into the aftertaste, some of the fruity sweetness starts to show its way, show its head a little bit more as well. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes about its business. It's really interesting in a lot of ways, actually. So yeah, this has been an experience to try this one. It's been a little bit of a longer review, which I can appreciate. But yeah, this is definitely one to try if you want something completely different. If you like a big peated whiskey, you are going to enjoy this beer. If not, you might find this one a little bit sort of overwhelming, if you like. But I think we can round off this review there. So yeah, this one was the 4 Aces, a peated quadruple, and it certainly was peated, coming in at 10% ABV from Brouwerij Het Nest in Turnhout in Vlaanderen in the very north of Belgium. A really interesting beer to review, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my take on this one as well. So yeah, an interesting introduction to this brewery for sure. So I think I need to try one of their more kind of regular beers next time, but this was the one that appeared through Systembolaget here in Sweden. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brouwerij Het Nest. Hopefully we can return to these guys at some point soon. I'd love to review some of their more kind of regular beers if you like, but this one was really interesting. The 4 Aces peated quadruple, 10% ABV from Brouwerij Het Nest in Turnhout in Vlaanderen in Belgium. Check out my social media, check out this brewery, let me know your own thoughts on the beer in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you in the next review.